there is a specific phenomenon in this country of Muslim, predominantly Pakistani male gangs grooming, raping, sexually torturing young, mostly girls, some boys. Even to say that is Islamophobic. We should all be able to, in a free society, criticise every idea. People start to think, well, am I allowed to say what I think? My very strong hope is that come the next election, there will be one organisation that people who have conservative values feel that they feel really good about going into the ballot box and sort of putting a cross next to the name for. And my job is to make that the Conservative Party.
Katie, what is the government doing on this definition of Islamophobia stuff? You just explain that to our viewers quickly.
Of course. So the government is looking to define Islamophobia, and the reason that this matters is because they claim that they aren't going to put it into law. But one, as we know, there are lots of soft ways that you can influence things without actually changing legislation, and a lot of those can be very damaging. And two, they may well go back on what they've said and put it into law anyway. And the reason that people should care about this, and lots of people do, is because Islam is a belief system. It's an idea. And we should all be able to, in a free society, criticise every idea. And so the fact that there's a word centred around Islamophobia rather than Muslims, individual Muslims, or the phrase which is used now, which I think is better, is anti-Muslim hatred. You can see why you wouldn't want that. But criticism of a religion is a fundamental part of British society. We have to be able to do that. And so if the government move ahead with defining Islamophobia and starting to use it in all sorts of official contexts, I think that's going to stifle free speech.
I was just going to ask, do you think more broadly there is an issue of free speech and it's being undermined in this country at the moment?
Yes, and it's a long-term progression where people have been worried about offending people. This idea of taking offence being more important than people being able to say whatever they want. And we've seen several people now arrested and charged for burning a Quran, for example, which, it's not a nice thing to do, but it's not a crime. Mm-hmm. You should be able to burn a Quran or a Bible or a Torah or your religious critical book of choice. And the trends that we're seeing are making it harder and harder either to speak out in public, or, which is as bad because it has a chilling effect, for people to feel like they can speak out in public. And that's things like the Islamophobia definition. It's arresting people for burning religious books. It's non-crime hate incidents, which the police spend 60,000 hours on a year. The combination of all of these things means people start to think, well, am I allowed to, in my home, in this free country, am I allowed to say what I think? Yeah,
do you think that two-tier justice is a real problem in this country?
I think it is. I think we have to be really concerned about, firstly, whether the laws are right in the first place, and then secondly, whether the way that they're applied, both by the police and then by the criminal justice system, is fair. And it's a basic tenet of our whole society, of British history, that you don't have two-tier justice, that justice is the same for everybody, that all British citizens are equal before the law. And both if that is undermined and also if people feel it's undermined, the perception here is important as well as the underlying reality, then you've got a big problem.
I mean, we're talking about free speech, censorship, so another aspect of that is the Online Safety Act. And I brought that up with Jacob Rees-Mogg in a previous interview. We discussed that, and of course he was involved in that. You were a newer intake, so you didn't have anything to do with that drafting that legislation. But do you think it should be scrapped entirely? Is it wrong-footed, that act?
I have a lot of sympathy with people wanting to protect children from a lot of what is on the internet. I can completely see why you would want to do that. I think that there are other ways to do that, like banning smartphones in schools, for example, which actually I do support, although I also think individual schools should be able to make that decision themselves. Right. Realistically, the way that technology works, the only way that you are going to stop children from accessing harmful content is if their parents manage their access to the internet. It takes almost no time at all to download a VPN any 13-year-old knows how to do it. You know, if you're really talking about enacting this law, the only way really that you're going to reach children is through their parents.
Yeah. And should we just discuss immigration for a little bit as well? Because, you know, that's a subject that you've talked a lot about yourself on social media. But the question I'm asking your colleagues and some of your former colleagues is, I mean, why should we trust the Conservatives, particularly on this issue? Is this not the single biggest failure of the Conservatives? The net migration was just so high, and you're really going to struggle to win back trust on that topic.
Well, the short answer is yes. It was, I think, the single biggest failure of certainly more recent years. There's some nuance about when we were still in the European Union. We actually managed to get non-EU migration down a lot. But the short answer is yes, it was a failure. It was a mistake. It's been in many ways a catastrophe. And the only way to win back credibility with the public, I think, is to have the right set of policies, which are both from a legal perspective and operationally will actually solve the problem. Be really consistent about that and be honest about where things went wrong and the way to fix them. But the only way that I can see to come back to a place of credibility with the public is to be honest and specific and consistent.
Yeah, so I will ask about those specific policies, but do you think some of your Conservative Party colleagues in the Commons lack the appetite for this? I know, you're talking in very strong terms about this. There are the likes of Robert Jenrick who are the same. But is there not a faction within the parliamentary party which is actually going to undermine this sort of robust sort of kind of thinking?
Well, not all of it, the policy is not completely developed, but a lot of, particularly on legal migration, the policy answers or positions have already been set out and they've already been voted on by the parliamentary party. So that isn't yet what we've seen.
But do you think, okay, fine, let's not talk, about what's been voted on, but more broadly, should there be a cap on net migration? Should it be 0? Do you have a number in mind that you think is ideal?
There should definitely be a cap. So the whole fundamental way that we've looked at and thought about immigration, in my opinion, has been wrong. So if you look in isolation just at the rules, if you just think, well, what should qualify you to be able to come here, then that number is going to be massive. There are billions of people all across the world, lots of them, which is great, want to come here. It's a reflection of how brilliant Britain is and what a fantastic place it is to live. But by doing that, we've only ever asked, well, what bar would we like people to be able to clear? And if they've cleared it, then we can take as many as you like. And of course, we know that's not true. It's just not the case that we have the infrastructure, the housing, whether that's power or water or whatever it might be, places for people to live, to take an infinite number of people. And so I think we should go completely the other way around and say, how many people do we want? And once we've decided how many people we want, we can work out from that who we want those people to be. And what that also means is that the challenge around the cabinet table is every cabinet minister, other than the Home Secretary, pretty much has an interest in immigration going up. So the Education Secretary is advocating for more foreign students. The Health Secretary wants more people to come and work very cheaply in the NHS. The DEFRA Secretary wants more people to come on seasonal worker visas. And only the Home Secretary is saying, but if you add all of this up, then this is impossible. This is not going to work. So if you have a hard cap, then you're forcing people to negotiate within a strict number rather than just always wanting more. And of course, the business department and the Treasury, all of the money departments always want more people because they just want headline GDP to grow. So I think there definitely has to be a cap. The question of whether it should be a net or gross migration cap is a bit more complicated because there are net migration since 2021 has been 3.4 million people. My view and the party policy view is that a lot of those people will need to go home again. They came on a 5-year visa, they will stay for their visa and then it's time to go home, rather than to get what's called indefinite leave to remain and settle in the UK and stay. So from the people who've come here and are here legitimately, you should have a lot of people leaving. Best estimates, for obvious reasons, this is difficult to guess, but best estimates, there are between 1 and 2 million people in the UK illegally. I think all of those people should leave, just by definition, because they shouldn't have been here in the first place. Either they've come here illegally or they've overstayed a visa. So you're looking at, if it works, millions of people leaving over relatively few years, over a relatively short space of time. And so then the question is how much capacity that frees up, and therefore how many people you might want to bring in. But I could see either. I could see an argument for a net cap, but also I could see an argument for a gross cap, because that way you can decide how many people you can take, independent of whether you or how successfully you get people to leave, and the pace of that, because that's quite difficult to forecast.
But either way, you're still, in your own words, asking a lot of people, or telling a lot of people, to go home.
Yeah.
So you'll need to marshal serious government resources to get them to go home. Is that feasible? I mean, you've seen what the machinery of government is really like when you were a special advisor, right? Have you seen any sort of institutional resistance, lack of resources? Is that not itself quite a significant problem?
Yes, but a totally solvable one. So there are definitely both of those things, institutional resistance and lack of resources. But we've also seen, like during the pandemic, if the state really wants to, it can do really big things on a pretty rapid time frame. Yeah. It just doesn't want to.
Yeah.
So if you had a government, firstly with a sufficient mandate from the public, which I think there obviously is, but having won an electoral mandate from the public to do this, and that was incredibly focused and dedicated and consistent, such that the machine had to accept that this is what they were going to do, then yes, you could do it. But it wouldn't be easy, but it's totally doable.
Yeah. I always find it interesting talking to people who've been on the inside and seeing how this all works. It's something like we were talking with Jacob Rees-Mogg about this specifically. I mean, I just want to home in on that institutional resistance a little bit. When you were in government, did you see specific examples of that? Was it frustrating being a special advisor and trying to get these civil servants to do stuff? Yes.
So when I worked in the Home Office for about a year.
Yeah.
And I worked on national security, and a lot of that is not entirely, but mostly. Most people agree most of the time. So it's like MI5 oversight, counter-terrorism, serious organised crime, that kind of thing. And there are some points of contention and debate within that, particularly around something called Prevent, which is about sort of anti-extremism and trying to de-radicalise people. But broadly, most people most of the time agree. But I saw particularly my colleagues who did a lot of work on in the immigration brief. There's massive pushback from the system. I remember specifically we were trying to change the way that migrants' ages were assessed when they came over the channel. So even on the current system, the government's figures say, I think last year, about half of migrants who came here illegally over the channel who said they were under 18 weren't. They were later assessed to be adults, or they admitted that actually they were. And there was a big push. The Conservatives changed the law to do medical assessments of people's age, and the system was incredibly resistant to doing that. And suddenly everything takes too long. It's too expensive.
Yeah.
Everything immediately is illegal, even if you just pass the law to change it, and Parliament is sovereign and makes the law. So it can be really difficult to get things done in government, but also with the right will, you can do anything. Yeah. The civil service just have to take that seriously.
Do you think the Home Office should be split, and so you have a specific department for migration, given the scale of what you're suggesting?
Well, I think it was always a mistake to split the prisons from the police. So when, I think it was the Blair government, wasn't it, did the initial split, I think that was always quite a weird choice, rather than... So prisons also used to be managed in the Home Office, and they took out prisons and courts and the criminal justice system, but they left the police with the Home Office and the border. So it's always seemed to me that a more intuitive matchup would be to have, immigration and the border, and then police and courts and prisons.
So yeah, so that part, the policing is subsumed into what is now the Ministry of justice, right?
Yeah, something
And
like. I mean,
something like-
I don't know how you sort of title it.
I know we're talking in broad terms. It is just interesting because I've obviously covered this as a journalist for a couple of years, but every time I talk to, say, Home Office sources, a lot of them say that this department just doesn't function. It doesn't work. Sort of what you're describing.
It's ludicrously big. I mean, you would never, ever, say, in the private sector, expect an organisation that large with that wider remit to be at all successful. And obviously it's not very successful. But you could say that about the whole government, right? I mean,
of course.
The scope of what the government does is so massive.
Yeah.
In any other context, if you looked at an organisation trying to do all of that, you would just say, well, this is obviously going to be a failure.
Yeah.
And often it is.
Of course, yeah. Now, I just want to move on to grooming gangs as well, whilst we've still got you. So I think I know the answer to this. Is the government moving too slowly on that grooming gangs inquiry? Does it need to move much, much quicker and be much more forensic?
Well, thus far, it doesn't really seem like it's moving at all.
Yeah.
So it's a balance, because I'm so pleased, and particularly pleased for the victims and survivors who really wanted this and have been unspeakably brave in campaigning for it and speaking out about it, and whistleblowers and journalists as well. And so the fact that the government has accepted that we need this at all is a massive victory, and we shouldn't lose that. But the longer it takes, I'm still worried, because we haven't seen the terms of reference, that it will end up being a kind of coordination of local inquiries. It seems like the government is indicating that it won't be that, but they're also saying, well, it's up to the independent chair to decide, which is not really true, because it's up to the government to set the terms of reference. So there's a question mark, unfortunately, over a lot of it still.
Yeah, but do you think the fact that the government did move on this eventually, has the Overton window, as a phrase that is used more commonly in political parlance now, so the acceptable terms of debate on this topic, has it moved? Because part of the reason it took so long was people were afraid of being perceived as racist or xenophobic, whatever. Is that a significant change to the political debate, you think?
It's shifted massively. So I think Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary, said the other day in the House of Commons, the Prime Minister said it was a far-right bandwagon in January, and by June it's government policy. I mean, that is a remarkably fast journey. I talked about the gangs in Parliament in April, and at the time, the way that both the Labour and the Liberal Democrat members of Parliament who were in the room responded to me was, this is disgusting, this makes my blood boil, this is appalling to talk about it like this. I talked about the racially and religiously aggravated nature and in some cases motivated nature of a lot of these crimes. And then by September, you've got government ministers saying there is a particular phenomenon of Pakistani, either Pakistani or Pakistani origin Muslim gangs. And that's a massive shift in whatever that is, 4 or 5 months.
Yeah, it's just unbelievable. And obviously the work that Charlie Peters did as well, my former colleague
at
GB News, I think that made a significant difference on this. And also it connects to the stuff we were talking about earlier on Islamophobia, don't you think? It's all connected.
So the government definition of Islamophobia is closely related to a group called the APPG, the All-Party Parliamentary Group on British Muslims. Yeah. They did a report on Islamophobia in 2019, about defining Islamophobia in 2019. And it says within it, appealing to free speech, like the very notion of free speech, the way that people use it in this context is just another form of anti-Muslim racism. And one real-life example of this concerns grooming gangs. So, I mean, there's so many different problems with that. Firstly, like I said earlier, you can't be racist to Muslims because Islam isn't a race and all of that kind of thing. So it just doesn't make any sense even on its own terms. But it's really frightening that the group that is driving a lot of this think that saying the truth, which is there is a specific phenomenon in this country of Muslim, predominantly Pakistani male gangs grooming, raping, sexually torturing young, mostly girls, some boys, that even to say that is Islamophobic and therefore forbidden.
Obviously, we've relaunched here at Guido. We're new media first. This is our new fancy podcast studio.
It is very fancy.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, it's kind of a leading question because I want to know how you get your news and what your take is on how news is evolving. Because you're you're posting a lot of stuff on social media. Is that how you get your message out now?
It's both, I would say, how I read a lot of my news and how I like to communicate. I think that's any politician who's doing a good job should be meeting people where they are. And a lot of people, I think it may now be most people are getting their news from social media. For the news outlets that I really like yours, of course, I will
like to hear.
Exactly. I will go straight to the website for a few of them, but I'd say the majority of my news I'm getting mostly probably through Twitter.
Yeah, I think that's the same for almost everyone in SW1 now, isn't it? It's been democratized in some way. So you're looking at specific journalists as well.
Yes, although I think what you say about SW1 is totally right, which is you therefore have to be careful about that because Twitter is not the country, and of course it's changed a lot since it was bought by Elon Musk. But I remember on the day after the Brexit referendum in 2016. A friend of mine tweeted, looks like my tweet timeline of 100 Remain, 0% Leave was slightly off.
Yeah.
And you do have to be careful that, particularly given that the algorithm shows you things that you're likely to be interested in, you have to be careful that you aren't just only ever preaching to the choir. But I think it's fundamental in the modern world of communicating. You know, if you're just going to be doing 6 o'clock and 10 o'clock news, then you aren't going to speak to almost everybody in the country, and I think that's terrible.
Absolutely. I just want to wrap up by asking about the future of the Conservative Party, where you are, the polling, all that sort of stuff. Now, you know what I'm going to ask. Are you getting outflanked by Reform? Is it too late? It's
not too late. Otherwise, if I believed it were too late, then I'd be somewhere else and I'd be doing something else. Yeah. My deep belief is that the right vehicle to save this country is a reformed Conservative Party. It's obviously also true, and it would be ridiculous to imply that it's not true, that the Conservative Party has in some ways failed the country when it's been in power. So of course it's hard to find that path which is honest about that, but offers a compelling and hopeful vision for the future. That's what I'm trying to do, is to rebuild that trust and show people what that might be. And that's, I think, what the party is trying to do now across the board.
You're a new MP. You've only been here in Parliament just over a year. So did you ever question standing in the first place? Because you must have been watching, you were in government as a special advisor. You must have been watching all this unfold and think, do I put my hat in the ring? Is this going to be a waste of time?
Well, one of the reasons that I stood is because I was very frustrated. And of course you can. So if there's an institution which isn't doing what that institution is supposed to do, then you've got two options. You can fix it or you can leave it. And sometimes, like I thought with the European Union, the attempts to fix it just don't work. And you get to the stage where the only action that's left to you is just to leave. But I don't think at all that that's where we are with the Conservative Party. I believe, and I think this process has very firmly begun, that it can be rebuilt into the organisation that it needs to be to fix and save the country and take it forward to a brighter future. But it's hard work to build back that trust with the public, and it should be. You know, they should need to see that we've really changed and that we're much better.
Do you think this idea of uniting the right, now whatever the composition is, whether it's Reform leading it or a Conservative-led, whatever, combining those in some way, in some loose way, is the best case scenario for the country? Because that's what Jacob Rees-Mogg was arguing last week. It's interesting to ask you, because you're on the inside, you're in Parliament. What do you think?
Well, the basic maths are that if we keep splitting people who are on the right, consider themselves to be, you know, sympathetic with conservative values, as certainly as they would traditionally have been thought about, then we are making it much more likely that we'll have a second term of this disastrous Labour government, and that would be a very, very bad outcome for the nation. I think we're several years away from the next election, and what the journey looks like from here to there, I think is hard to say. Well, it's impossible to say. But my very strong hope is that come the next election, there will be one organisation that people who have conservative values feel that they that they feel really good about going into the ballot box and sort of putting a cross next to the name for. And my job is to make that the Conservative Party.
So finally, we've got the Conservative Party conference in, at the time of recording, it's about a month from now. Yeah. What are you looking for there? Because there's the debate over the ECHR. I know what your personal position is. So are you hoping that the Wolfson review comes back and Kemi Badenoch says, yep, we're out, we're leaving, and then that's the policy going forward and everyone marshals behind that?
Well, my personal view, as you mentioned, which I've been public about for a while, is in practice, I don't think we can manage our border within the European Court of Human Rights. You can have a more academic conversation about whether, in theory, you could do it under the convention. But the question is, in the world that we actually live in, is this a help or a hindrance? And I think it's very obviously a hindrance. I therefore think sort of circular reasoning almost, but because I think that, I think that will be the position that the party gets to, because I think that that's just a fact. And David Wolfson is a very thoughtful man, and there are, if you're going to change those sorts of laws, you do have to think about, well, what do you do about all of the cases that were decided in between? Do they still stand? Does the precedent still stand? Or are you wiping those? If you wipe them, what does that mean? So, you do have to think it through, which I'm hoping is effectively what will have been done in the run-up to conference. And my hope is that that's where the policy lands.
Katie Lam, thank you very much for joining us here on Guido. Really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Cheers.